Hey family, welcome back to Reclaiming the Throne. Today we're diving into the greatest stories of resistance the world has ever seen. These weren't just isolated uprisings or spontaneous riots, they were organized rebellions against entire systems of oppression. Men and women who refused to accept chains as their destiny rose up against empires, plantation economies, and the very concept of human ownership. This is the top 10 greatest slave rebellions in history, movements that shook foundations and wrote freedom into existence. At number 10, the Saoto Rebellion of 1595. On a small volcanic island off the West African coast, Portuguese colonizers had established a brutal sugar plantation economy built on enslaved labor. But one man would change everything. Amador, born into slavery but possessing remarkable leadership skills, united over 2,000 enslaved Africans across the island's plantations. On July 9, 1595, he declared himself King Amador and launched a coordinated attack that captured over two-thirds of the island within days. For almost 2 weeks, Amador's forces controlled most of Sao Tome, burning plantations and establishing their own governance. Though Portuguese reinforcements eventually crushed the rebellion and Amador was publicly executed, his legacy endured. Today, his image appears on Sao Tome's currency, and a national holiday commemorates his resistance, a man who dared to crown himself king in defiance of his oppressors. From the islands of Africa to the rainforests of South America. Number 9. The Maroon Rebellions of Suriname. Beginning in the late 17th century and continuing for over 100 years, these weren't just escapes, they were the building of new nations. Deep in the dense Surinamese jungle, escaped Africans formed sophisticated communities known as Maroon societies. Groups like the Ndiuka, Saramaka, and Matawai didn't just survive, they thrived, creating military structures, unique cultural identities, and even their own languages that blend African roots with European elements. Led by warriors like Chief Boni, they mastered guerrilla warfare tactics that left Dutch colonial forces bewildered and defeated. Their knowledge of the jungle terrain combined with African military traditions made them nearly unbeatable in their territory. By 1760, the Dutch colonial government was forced to do the unthinkable, sign formal peace treaties with these communities they had once considered property. These treaties recognized Maroon sovereignty over vast territories and their right to self-governance. What makes this rebellion extraordinary is its permanence. These communities still exist today in Suriname's interior, maintaining their unique cultures and autonomy over centuries. Coming in at number 8, the Carla Rebellion of 1843. In Cuba's Matanzas province on the Triunvirato sugar plantation, an enslaved Yoruba woman named Carla Lukakumi transformed from field worker to revolutionary icon in a matter of hours. Using a network of communication developed through African drum codes that plantation owners couldn't decipher, Carla orchestrated a multi-plantation uprising. Her weapon of choice was simple but terrifying to the slave owners, a machete she wielded with deadly precision. What made Carla's leadership unique was her tactical approach. Rather than gathering in one large group, her followers moved between plantations in coordinated waves, freeing the enslaved and executing particularly cruel overseers. Within days, the rebellion had spread to over 5 major plantations. Spanish colonial authorities responded with overwhelming force, eventually capturing and executing Carla by tying her to horses that tore her body apart, a gruesome end that only amplified her legend. Today, Operation Carla was the code name Cuba used for its military mission to Angola in the 1970s. A woman who died fighting for freedom became a symbol of international solidarity against oppression. Number 7. The Burbus Rebellion of 1763. In the Dutch colony of Burbus, now part of modern Guyana, enslaved Africans outnumbered their European captors by a ratio of nearly 20-1. The brutal working conditions on sugar and coffee plantations combined with food shortages and disease created the perfect conditions for revolt. A man known as Kofi, or Kofi, meaning born on Friday in Akan, emerged as the leader. Born in West Africa before being transported to Burbus, Kofi had absorbed both African military traditions and an understanding of European tactics. On February 23, 1763, the uprising began at Plantation Magdalenenburg and spread rapidly. Within weeks, Kofi commanded nearly 3,000 fighters and controlled all of Burbus except one well-fortified plantation and the colony's main fort. What distinguishes this rebellion is that Kofi established a functioning government, appointed officials, and even attempted diplomatic negotiations with Dutch authorities. For nearly a year, he effectively ruled Burbus as an independent state. Though Dutch reinforcements eventually crushed the rebellion and Kofi reportedly took his own life rather than face capture, his legacy lives on. Today he is honored as a national hero in Guyana, with his likeness featured on their currency, and a towering statue of him standing in Georgetown's Square of the Revolution. At number 6, Nat Turners Rebellion of 1831. In Southampton County, Virginia, a deeply religious enslaved man experienced visions he believed came directly from God. Nat Turner, able to read and write, interpreted solar eclipses and strange weather phenomena as divine signs that he should rise against the institution of slavery. What makes Turner's rebellion distinctive was its religious foundation. He saw himself not just as a freedom fighter, but as an instrument of divine vengeance. Turner waited for a sign, which he believed came on August 21, 1831, when the sun appeared bluish-green due to atmospheric conditions. That night, Turner and a small band of followers moved from plantation to plantation, using axes, knives, and blunt instruments rather than firearms to maintain the element of surprise. Their approach was methodical. They killed entire white families, including women and children, whom Turner believed represented the future of slavery. Within 48 hours, approximately 60 white Virginians had been killed, sending shockwaves through the American South. The militia and federal troops eventually crushed the rebellion, capturing Turner after he had hidden for 2 months. Before his execution, Turner gave a detailed confession to attorney Thomas R. Gray, published as The Confessions of Nat Turner, providing rare insight into the mind of an enslaved revolutionary. The aftermath was brutal. Over 200 black people, many uninvolved in the rebellion, were murdered by white mobs. Virginia and other southern states passed new laws further restricting the rights of both enslaved and free black people. Turner's rebellion fundamentally changed American slavery, hardening southern positions and accelerating the path towards civil war. His name remains a powerful symbol of resistance against impossible odds, a spiritual warrior who believed freedom was a divine mandate. Number 5. The German Coast Uprising of 1811. In the territory of Orleans, just upriver from New Orleans, between 200 and 500 enslaved people staged what remains the largest slave revolt in United States history, yet it's barely mentioned in most American history books. Led by Charles Delon, a mixed-race slave driver from Haiti who likely had knowledge of the successful Haitian Revolution, the uprising began on January 8, 1811, at the Andre Plantation in St. John the Baptist Parish. What makes this rebellion tactically significant was its military approach. Deslandes organized the rebels into companies with officers and marching formations. Armed with cane knives, axes, and a few firearms, they marched toward New Orleans along the Mississippi River, burning plantations and recruiting more fighters along the way. Their ultimate goal was ambitious: to capture New Orleans itself and establish a black republic similar to Haiti and Louisiana. As they marched, they carried flags and drums, creating a military spectacle designed to inspire fear in plantation owners and hope in the enslaved. The territorial governor mobilized the U.S. Army, militia forces, and volunteer battalions to crush the rebellion. In the battle that followed, dozens of rebels were killed, and many captured were subjected to hasty trials, followed by execution. As a warning to others, the heads of executed rebels were placed on pikes along the river road stretching 40 miles. A grisly reminder of the price of resistance. The road became known as the Road of Heads. The German Coast Uprising represents not just resistance but revolutionary aspiration, people who didn't just want freedom for themselves but dreamed of building a new nation founded on liberty. Coming in at number 4, the Palares Rebellion in colonial Brazil. This wasn't just a rebellion. It was the establishment of an independent African state in the Americas that lasted nearly a century, from approximately 1605 to 1694. Palares wasn't a single settlement but a confederation of at least 10 fortified communities called Mocambos, strategically located in the mountainous jungle region of Alagoas. At its height, it had a population estimated at 11,000 to 20,000 people, many born free in Palares itself. What makes Palares extraordinary was its sophisticated social and political structure. It combined elements of various African cultures with adaptations to the Brazilian environment. The kingdom had a centralized government led by a king, but local Mocambos maintained significant autonomy. Zumbi dos Palmares, born free in Palmares around 1655, emerged as its most famous leader. Unlike earlier leaders who sometimes negotiated with Portuguese authorities, Zumbi refused any compromise that would limit freedom. Under his leadership, Palmares developed advanced defensive systems that repelled more than 25 major Portuguese military expeditions. Palmares wasn't just defensive. It conducted raids on plantations to free the enslaved and became a hub of resistance. The community developed sustainable agriculture, produced pottery and metalwork, and even traded with some sympathetic outsiders. In 1694, after deploying its largest expedition yet, nearly 9,000 soldiers led by Bandeirante Domingos Jorge Velho The Portuguese finally breached Palares' defenses. Zumbi escaped but was betrayed, captured and beheaded on November 20, 1695. The Portuguese displayed his head in a public square to prove the legendary leader was truly dead. Today, November 20th is celebrated as Black Consciousness Day in Brazil, and Zumbi is recognized as a national hero, a man who built not just resistance, but an alternative vision of society itself. At number 3, the Jamaican Maroon Wars. When the British seized Jamaica from Spain in 1655, they didn't realize they'd also inherited an unconquerable enemy. The Maroons, communities of formerly enslaved Africans who had escaped during Spanish rule and established strongholds in the island's mountainous interior. What makes the Jamaican Maroon resistance unique was its dual leadership and longevity. Two distinct Maroon societies emerged, the Windward Maroons in the east, led by the legendary Queen Nanny, and the Leeward Maroons in the west, led by Captain Cudjoe. Queen Nanny, born in Ghana and brought to Jamaica as an enslaved person, escaped and established Nanny Town in the Blue Mountains. A military strategist and spiritual leader versed in Obeah traditions, she reportedly could catch bullets between her hands and used psychological warfare against British troops. Under her leadership, the Windward Maroons controlled territory that British forces couldn't penetrate despite multiple expeditions. Captain Cudjoe led the Leeward Maroons from Trelawney Town, developing guerrilla tactics that devastated British forces. His fighters used camouflage, ambushes, and intimate knowledge of the terrain to defeat much larger colonial armies. The First Maroon War, from 1731 to 1739, ended not with Maroon defeat, but with peace treaties. The British, unable to defeat the Maroons militarily, recognized their freedom and autonomy over significant territories. These treaties acknowledged Maroon sovereignty decades before the Haitian Revolution. Though the British would later violate these agreements, leading to the Second Maroon War in the 1790s, many Maroon communities maintain their distinctive identity and partial autonomy in Jamaica today, direct descendants of those original freedom fighters. Queen Nanny appears on Jamaica's $500 bill, and in 1976, she was declared a national hero, the only woman among Jamaica's 7 official national heroes. Her legacy represents over 80 years of successful armed resistance against one of the world's most powerful empires. Number 2, the Zange Rebellion, 9th century Iraq. This wasn't just a revolt, it was a revolution that shook an empire to its core and lasted nearly 15 years from 869 to 883 CE. The Abbasid Caliphate, one of history's most powerful states, had imported thousands of East African slaves known as Zange to drain the salt marshes of southern Iraq. Working in malarial swamps under brutal conditions, these laborers were treated as expendable. Led by Ali ibn Muhammad, who claimed Alid descent from the family of Prophet Muhammad, the rebellion began in the city of Basra in 869 CE. What makes this uprising remarkable was its scale and organization. The Zange rebels didn't just escape, they built their own capital city, Al-Muqtara, the Chosen, with palaces, mosques, and markets. At its height, the rebellion controlled most of southern Iraq, redirected trade routes, minted its own currency, and fielded armies of tens of thousands. They defeated multiple caliphal armies sent against them, capturing cities and threatening Baghdad itself. The Zange weren't fighting just for freedom, but for a new social order. Ali ibn Muhammad established a government structure with officials and administrators. The movement attracted not only enslaved Africans, but also free Arabs, Persians, and others, oppressed by Abbasid rule. It took the full might of the Abbasid Caliphate, under military genius al-Muwaffaq, to finally defeat the Zange in 883 CE, after dedicating enormous resources to the conflict for over a decade. The Zange Rebellion represents one of history's most successful challenges to established order. Enslaved people who didn't just fight for freedom but created an alternative society and challenged an empire at the height of its power. And finally, at number 1, the Haitian Revolution of 1791 to 1804. This wasn't just a rebellion, it was a world-altering revolution that destroyed the most profitable colonial plantation economy of its time, defeated 3 European empires, and established the first black republic in modern history. Saint-Domingue, as Haiti was then known, was France's richest colony, producing more sugar than all British West Indian colonies combined, and 60% of the world's coffee. This wealth was built on an exceptionally brutal plantation system, where the average enslaved person survived only 7 years after arrival. The revolution began on August 22, 1791, following a voodoo ceremony at Bois Cayman led by Duddy Boukman and priestess Cécile Fatiman. Within days, over 100,000 enslaved people had joined the uprising, burning plantations across the northern plain. What makes the Haitian Revolution unparalleled was its comprehensive victory and the military genius of its leaders. Toussaint Louverture, born enslaved but freed before the revolution, emerged as its strategic mastermind. He transformed bands of revolutionaries into a disciplined army that repeatedly defeated European forces. When Napoleon sent 43,000 French troops, France's largest overseas deployment, to restore slavery in 1802, the Haitian revolutionaries defeated them in a series of brilliant campaigns. After Louverture's capture through betrayal, Jean-Jacques Dessalines led the final phase of the revolution. On January 1, 1804, Dessalines declared independence, renaming the colony Haiti after its indigenous Taino name. This represented the only successful slave revolution in modern history, and the second independent nation in the Americas after the United States. The Haitian Revolution sent shockwaves through the Atlantic world. It forced Napoleon to sell the Louisiana Territory to the United States, doubling America's size. It inspired abolition movements globally, and it proved conclusively that notions of white supremacy could be defeated on the battlefield. Haiti paid an enormous price for its freedom, isolated internationally, and forced to pay reparations to French slave owners that crippled its economy for over a century. Yet its revolution remains the most profound challenge to slavery ever mounted, a complete transformation from Europe's most profitable colony to a nation founded explicitly on universal liberty and racial equality. These rebellions weren't just moments, they were movements. Each represents not just the desire for personal freedom, but the struggle to reimagine what society could be. From Palares' independent kingdom to Haiti's revolutionary republic, they weren't just fighting against something, they were fighting for new possibilities. These weren't just acts of destruction, but acts of creation, forging new identities, communities, and even nations from the crucible of resistance. What connects all these rebellions is the extraordinary courage to reject the world as it was, and fight for the world that could be. Our ancestors didn't just dream of freedom, they built it, fought for it, and sometimes died for it. Thanks for watching, family. This is Reclaiming the Throne, where we honor the power they tried to erase from history books. Until next time, keep the legacy alive.